Lisa Harper, I am so thrilled to have you today. Thank you for being with me.
Listen, I'm like a rabid fan because, I became a mom at 50.
Yep.
And I started a doctoral candidacy at 55. And so I am all about doing the thing. I'm just usually late to the party.
I love that.
I love what you do.
Oh, I love that so much. Okay. So I want to tell people who maybe either do or don't know a lot about your story, kind of my first memory of you. One of my first memories, I knew about you, but you taught a message called My Redeemer Lives a few years ago at Elevation.
Oh, wow. At Elevation. Yeah.
On
Job.
You did. And it was
my goodness. I can't believe you watched that.
Awesome. I watched it and I texted one of my best friends this morning. And when you like get to meet somebody that, you've looked up to, or this whole world is just so fun for me, like, especially when we're so isolated right now, that I texted my friend in all caps this morning. And I said, do you remember Lisa's message from a few years back? I just need somebody to freak out and be excited with me that I get to make a new friend at 1 p.m. today. So, and she was like,
Rebecca, you need to raise the bar. You have got to raise the bar, baby.
Well, I loved that message and just how you shared what God has done through your story and his faithfulness in the middle of really hard times, and how he moved in your life during that season. And so for people who want to know more, Lisa, or hear that story, that is a great place to start for you. They've retitled it on YouTube. So I want to tell people that it's now called When Life Falls Apart, which is also a really great title. So if people want to go back and listen to that, they totally can. But you have a new devotional coming out that I'm so beyond excited about. It's called, this is like the best title ever. Okay.
It's so funny you say that, because I am not a prolific writer, although I hope you'll tell your audience different.
You totally are.
But the only non-negotiable I had with this is I was like, please, please, please let me keep my subtitle. And so it was, usually I'm not smart enough to keep titles. They'll be like, well, we don't think that will sell. But this one, shockingly, I got to keep what I had it written in my iPhone notes. I was like, this is what I want to say. And I want people to feel safe before they even crack the book open. So yeah, sorry, I kind of spoiler alert there before you even said it.
Yeah, well, it's so good. The reason I love it is the subtitle. So it's called Life, an obsessively grateful, undone by Jesus, genuinely happy, and not faking it through the hard stuff kind of 100-day devotional. That's just the coolest. I love it. So I want to know, like, how did you come to, like, this is the right next project for me? Like, how did that all come about for you?
Well, it's, we're already getting into the down and dirty, Rebecca, because it's, I have to tell on myself. At the beginning of COVID, I travel and have for goodness, a long time vocationally. I'm usually on the road about 150 days a year. And so when COVID hit in March and everything shut down, all of a sudden my entire, what I'd planned for the year, of course, everything got canceled. And there was much more serious grief this past year, and we can talk about that in a minute. But the initial, response we had as a little family is, goodness gracious, what are we going to do? I had some seminary papers to write, some other things, but I was like, I am going to go stir crazy. We live in the boonies, about 20 minutes south of Nashville, on this little 5-acre farmette. And so one of the first things I started doing was landscaping, because I'm 57 and single. My husband is lost and won't stop to ask for directions. And so, I know my way around a power tool. And so I thought, I'm going to cut down some trees and plant some more fun stuff here. So I had a chainsaw and I was listening to worship music. I was trying to be godly, but still was being a little bit manic. And I had on my little safety glasses and everything. Well, I'm cutting down this tree. And I usually am a latent responder. My heart usually runs ahead of my head. And as I'm cutting down this tree, I just had this little, like the balloon over your head. I thought, that's weird. I didn't know this chainsaw threw sparks. And then the very second I thought that, I realized, oh crud, I smell gas. And I had nicked a propane line. And so, I mean, by the grace of God, I didn't blow us up, but I mean, I go running backwards with this chainsaw. I'm like, oh my goodness, I almost blew the house up. You know, I'm panicking, trying to find my 11-year-old who is much wiser than her mama. And it's weird. It was funny afterwards. In the process, I thought I have got to rein myself in, because going stir crazy is going to like literally blow up the peace God has breathed on our little family. And so I just was like, Lord, what can I do where I don't miss what you're teaching us during this season, and that would be a little more redemptive than cutting through propane lines? And I just sensed him saying, I want you to look back over your life. I want you to look back over your life, because you're so discombobulated because of COVID and things being unprecedented, things that you didn't plan. I want you to look back at the seasons of your life that during that moment may have seemed dark or disappointing, but I want you to look back and see my presence during those seasons. And it was kind of in looking back, it was almost that Deuteronomy moment, when Moses says, remember what God did, that I thought, boy, I would love to write a devotional. I'm a Bible teacher at heart, but I thought I'd love to write a devotional that isn't just Pollyanna-ish, that's not just the high points, but that goes to the pinnacles and the valleys, and talk about the sufficiency of God. And then, because I do so love his word, I wanted it to have, just enough exegesis in it that it was a sticky devotional, not just platitudes. And so really the genesis of writing, this is my first devotional. I think it's my 14th or 15th book. But it's my first devotional, and the genesis was almost blowing us up.
Wow. I love this so much. And I think it's really cool to think about the time in which it's coming into the world, right? When people listen to this, it will be in the world. And one of the parts of the subtitle that I love so much is the whole genuinely happy, not faking it part. I love that. And I mean, I think we all know the cool Sunday school answer to like how to strive for that. But how would you encourage listeners who maybe hear that statement, but like need to know more, like what did God teach you about contentment and joy and all these like words that we love to throw around,
right? But
you've lived it. So like,
and cross stitch. Well, I'll tell you, I didn't live it for so many years. When I gave my heart to Jesus when I was a kid, our dad had walked away from our family, and soon after Dad left, heard a preacher talk about how our Heavenly Father is the kind of dad who doesn't walk away from his kids, who doesn't abandon his kids. And so I can still remember, it was a million years ago when dinosaurs roamed the earth, but I can remember, walking that aisle in this little church and telling the pastor that I wanted to know God because I wanted a dad who wouldn't leave. But right after my real father left us, some men came and went from our family, and there was a lot of sexual molestation. And so from almost my earliest memories, I felt dirty and damaged because of that abuse. And so I equated for years being a good Christian. And if we were together, I'd put that in air quotes because I think it's a ludicrous statement. But I associated being a good Christian with being a good girl who followed the rules, who had it all together, who kind of at least proverbially wore Spanx. And so I was a poser, Rebecca, for years, even after my first go around in seminary, memorized a little Greek and Hebrew. And so I could tell you about the grace of the gospel, about his unmerited favor. But for myself, I just always felt like I just wasn't good enough to merit God's kindness. So I just would plow through with, a smile on my face. I was kind of a happy doppelganger. And it wasn't until I went through huge loss about 15 years ago that God just knocked the legs out from under my stool. And I sensed God saying, I've never heard an audible voice, but he speaks so clearly. John's gospel says we will recognize his voice just as surely as a sheep do their shepherds. And I sensed God saying, Lisa, I'm going to take you to the basement of your life, and I'm going to sit there with you in the dark until fear doesn't own you anymore. Mm-hmm. And that's when the mask, at least the last remnants of a mask, came off. And it was in being transparent with God that allowed me to actually be transparent with people. And I think in both cases, what you gain in that is this intimacy that you miss otherwise. I think when we have any type of a facade up between, most importantly, us and God, but then he's also called us a community, I just feel like you lose the kind of relationship that he's wired us for. You lose intimacy. So I think transparency, not faking it in every sphere of life, I think that is actually the conduit, as you said earlier. That's a conduit for peace. That's a conduit for joy. That's the only time you know that your relationship will stand the test of time and hardship, is if you've been real with each other. If you've presented a false front, then your relationship is based on falsehood. Yeah. So the older I get, the more transparent I want to be.
Yeah, I love that so much. And I love how it's true in so many of our lives that hard seasons and painful things that we walk through are often what God will use to like usher us into that. So
that's right.
At 22 years old, I had lived a relatively pain-free life. I hadn't experienced really loss outside of my great-grandparents that I knew for the first several years of my life. And when I graduated from college, the fall after that, my mom got diagnosed with cancer. And she's been a survivor now for about 6 years, but it was the most that the ground beneath me had ever been shaken. But it was in that season, like that's an Ebenezer season.
Absolutely.
When I look back in my walk with Christ, and I love how, God does that. And I love how he uses those things. He makes all things matter. And
it does.
And I love how that's true in your life too.
Yeah. I wouldn't, I'm not a masochist, so I don't pray for pain, but it really has been in the more difficult chapters, the dark nights of the soul, that I feel like the veil between me and God has gotten thinner. Yeah. And of course, Tim Keller is one of my favorite living theologians. I have a platonic crush on most of the old dead guys, but I love pretty much everything that Keller writes or preaches. But he said in one of his commentaries on Mark, he was talking about the story, with the guy who had the sick son, and the disciples missed it right after transfiguration. And it was this dad who was afraid for his son's health. And he confessed to Jesus, I believe, but help me in my unbelief. In other words, even on my best day, my heart isn't perfectly prostrate before you. I have some places where I'm afraid, or I'm still so stinking human. And Keller says, in light of that story, he said, helplessness, not holiness, is the first step to accessing intimacy with God. And I think, boy, that will preach, because that's true. It is when I recognize I can't make it by myself, not to glorify sin, but to recognize that his grace is greater still. And so those seasons in my life where I have truly been helpless, because I tend to be one of those, pull myself up by my bootstraps kind of girls. And so the seasons when I have not been able to, in any way, shape, or form, rescue or redeem what's hard or what's heartbreaking in my life, and I've been more cognizant that, gosh, I can't carry the weight of my own life. I'm so desperate for Jesus here. Those are those moments that you go, wow, he really is who he says he is. And the gospel really is sufficient no matter where we are in life.
Yeah, it is. Well, I love that you say that, because we mentioned at the very beginning just how hard this year has been for everybody, and how unprecedented, or whatever we want to call it, this time is that we're in. And so I want to hear about your year. Like, how did you cling to the hope of the gospel? What did that look like for you in 2020 and walking into 2021?
Yeah, it's just to be transparent. I am usually a glasses half full at all times, very optimistic. And that's God's kindness. That was after I got really honest. He takes the lid off your joy too. And so since I had the privilege of bringing my little girl home, I became a mom the year I turned 50. So I experienced menopause and motherhood at the same time, and brought my little girl home from Haiti. And she's been a miracle in a million ways. And I feel like our life is almost, the trajectory has been kind of pure joy and gratitude since then. I brought her home in 2014, and then 2020 hit. And so when COVID happened and I travel for work, and so I lost, of course, like a year's worth of work. And I was like, that's okay. That's okay. God is our provider. We'll be fine. Everything was positive until a month into COVID. Someone very, 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 very close to me committed suicide. And I mean, it just so rocked, our world. And of course, when the world at large is experiencing all this loss and the loss of lives due to COVID and livelihoods because of this pandemic, and then all the unrest that ensued soon after that, civilly and politically. And my daughter's from Haiti, so my little girl is the most beautiful child I've ever seen. I'm a pathologically biased, but we are a transracial family. And so it just seemed like everywhere you stepped, the ground was, just didn't seem like it was firm. Seemed like we had there was no peace in our circumstances. And then grieving the loss of this person so dear to us he was only 59 years old. There just weren't any warning signs. You get to that point of going, goodness gracious, Lord, I know you are good. But at this point, I just don't see anything around me that's good. All I see is loss and grief and vitriol and discord. And it made me so desperate for Jesus and so grateful for those moments that are so palpable. Right after this person close to us died, we were really concerned about having access to Missy's medication. My little girl has HIV, and I had some friends, her first mama died of undiagnosed AIDS. But I had some people say, Lisa, you need to, if at all possible, stockpile some of Missy's meds, because word on the medical street is that they're going to try to use some of those antiretrovirals in a cocktail for COVID, because, they're just trying anything to combat this virus. And long story short, there were a couple of weeks when it looked like we might not be able to get Missy's medicine. And it's too long a story to go into, but purely by the grace of God, I was able to get access to her medicine, but it was off the normal protocol. And so I had to pay out of pocket. It wasn't covered by insurance. And they called me to say it was going to be $5,000. And I was like, that's okay. Totally okay. And I don't mean to sound frivolous, because that's a lot of money for anybody. It was a huge chunk for us because I wasn't working for the better part of the year. But I was like, it's okay, no biggie. God will provide. And, by the grace of God, I've got savings. But it was just kind of one of those big hits. Yeah. Well, anyway, they end up losing the medicine. It's lost for a while. I mean, we're down to, Missy had 3 days of medicine left for HIV before finally, the FedEx truck comes driving up our driveway. And I was so overwhelmed that God provided this medicine. I was so grateful to finally get it, that I'm sure I scared the driver half to death, because this is when you would spray everything in the driveway with Lysol. You couldn't even pick up the package right away. And I'm crying and thanking him. He's like, oh my goodness, what in the world is in here? This woman's whacked. And he drives off, and I walk up to our porch, and I was so overwhelmed. And I know you've been there before, Rebecca, when you don't even have you can't be cool.
Oh, no.
You're so discombobulated by his grace. Yeah, so I end up kind of falling on my knees on the porch and just thanking God for this just tangible, literally life-saving or giving provision. And I'm crying on my porch, and maybe I'm there for, 3 or 4 minutes. And I go to get up because I thought, I've got to run inside and tell Missy what God did. Poor Missy, you don't know how many times I drag her to the living room, and I'm like, we have got to praise Jesus. She's like, okay, mama. So I stand up to go tell Missy that, God has brought her medicine. And when I did, my phone buzzed. And I pulled my phone out of my pocket and had a text from a pastor. And I had been at his church in the fall, so 5 months before COVID. And he said, basically, I hope this isn't presumptuous, but he said our church was looking for people to support who have lost their jobs or their livelihood as a result of COVID. And he said, one of the elders had a dream about you. And he said, we voted unanimously. And he said some very kind things about what I had gotten to do with their church and the ministry that God had brought. And he said, we voted unanimously, even though you're not a member of our church, you were a guest, to send you this donation. I mean, Rebecca, that's never happened to me in my life. Nobody's ever, and God's so taken care of me. I don't mean to say God hasn't provided, but just nobody's ever just out of the blue just sent me a donation. I don't ask for donations. God provides for us through books and everything else. And he said, I took the liberty of asking your assistant. And because she knew that I'd been at their church, she gave him my bank routing number. And he sent me a screenshot of what they had already sent to my bank. Rebecca, it was $5,000. And it's like God just, nobody's ever sent me $5. And I was like, no stinking way. Our God, and it's like he was just grinning at me I was already overwhelmed by his provision. And it's like he said, won't I do it? I am a father to fathers and a husband to the husbandless. And so I forgive me, I don't mean that to sound in any way braggadocious or perky, because I bet you've got a ton of people listening who are like, must be nice. I wish somebody would magically put $5,000 in my bank account. The way he provides looks different in every story. But I can tell you, as a 57-year-old woman who has made my fair share of mistakes, God has always been and will always be faithful. He's a redeemer. That's who he is. That's his character. And so COVID, in a way, because the noise, there's been much grief, but it's kind of like the din of busyness has settled enough to where I feel like we're hearing God louder. And I think this is the time, I don't want to say more than ever before, because it's always incumbent upon us as Christ followers to live Jesus-shaped lives. But I feel like because people are so desperate for real hope, for something that is sound and legitimate to put their hope in, now is such a critical time in history for Christ followers to say, let me tell you my story. Let me tell you what God has done. Life is hard, but our God, he really is good. We've got to quit being Pollyannas and be honest about our need and about our God who meets every single one.
Yeah. Gosh, I love that story so much. That is such a cool reminder to hear today. And I hope that's encouragement to listeners. And
you know how other people might tell you, like even during that season with your mom, they might go, oh, how cool that happened. Or wasn't that just such a great coincidence? And you go, I don't even have to say anything, but I know that was God. They may not see his handprints on it, but there's no stinking way I could have caused that to happen in our story.
Oh, yeah.
He's done that enough for me that I go, doesn't matter if my testimony rings true to anybody else. I know what he's done because I definitely couldn't have done it myself.
Oh, yeah. And my husband and I have this conversation often just as we pray forward into the next season and who knows what that holds for us and our ministry. And, we were recounting not that long ago, just how God had provided when we were engaged. And, so, a little bit of my story, I moved from Tennessee when I married my husband. He's a pastor down here in South Mississippi. And we live in the middle of nowhere. Okay. So we're like an hour from Jackson. We're a couple hours from New Orleans, but where we are, it's a town of like 12,000 people.
Yeah.
So before
everybody knows your name.
Everybody knows your name. All the people. And before I left, I was a corporate recruiter. That was what I did as like a job. I interviewed all day, which is really cool how God has like redeemed that.
Yeah.
Now I use that in podcasting. I love it. That's a whole nother story. But I really wanted to stay in the same work that I was doing when I got down here because I loved it. And we still needed that, that income walking into marriage. And so I had been praying and looking for something for months, even before we were engaged. And like 2 weeks before our wedding, like I'm on my way down to Mississippi with my last carload of stuff without a job. I mean, I just, I think, finished my last day at my previous job, didn't have a job. I was moving. I was going to become a pastor's wife. Everything about my life was about to be flipped upside down in the blink of an eye. And I got the call and the offer for my job that I have now. I mean, it was like 13 days before our wedding.
Only God. Only God. Mm-hmm.
And we just will so often say that very thing. Like, it was only God then. And like, I know, and I can trust his character, not just because of what he did in the past. He just is faithful.
He is.
But when I look back on what he's done, I know that I can trust his character in the future for whatever that holds. And so I think that's really important for us to remember right now. And no matter what we're facing.
Yeah. Well, and when you look at biblical history, you know, from the very beginning, we may not get the socio-historical context of scripture, but even if you get what was going on at the time, even passages that look problematic, if you get what God was doing, he has always been in the process of mitigating evil and redeeming our value, human dignity, and imago Dei, and pointing us toward redemption, toward the true north of Jesus. So I think the great thing that comes with age, because I can't see as well and I rarely wear pants with zippers now, but the great thing that comes with age is perspective.
Yeah.
You look backwards and go, oh my goodness, that wasn't a one-time thing. Like, he is always in the process of redemption. And so instead of being afraid when we're in a season that, as you said, so many people call this unprecedented, and there are things about it that are unprecedented in our generation.
Sure.
But it's not unprecedented historically. I just think we've gotten so comfortable with comfort, especially in America and first world countries, that, you know, you get your comfort shaken and we're all like, oh, it's a tragedy. And I'm like, well, yeah. And in tragedy, let's just look at the life of Job. Was God absent? Nope. Yeah. And what you see in Job is that our God is never capricious. He's always compassionate. But in the economy of God, pain and difficulty can actually be a promotion, can actually be God saying, you know, your shoulders are broad enough to carry this in a way that'll bring me glory. And so I'm less discombobulated by things that I don't understand now, only because I have this track record of God being faithful. And even when I am just such a dork, he is still a redeemer. And, you know, I get disciplined, I get divine spankings, but he is just always good. He's so kind and he's so accessible. Doesn't that slay you that he's still, I'm like, if I was God and my people were as quick to forget as we are, I would be like, okay, forget it. I'm just not going to reveal myself to you anymore. But he's so kind in the way he makes himself so accessible. That slays me too.
I know. I love that you say it slays you. I love that word. Okay, this has nothing to do with anything that we're talking about, and I don't know why
I love rabbit trails. Go there.
Okay. Have you ever been to the Holy Land?
Oh, you're killing me. 3 times. Okay. I've spent over a month in Israel. I'm going back in November for a week. Okay, listen to this. Last year, sorry, you should not have asked. You can already tell I'm such a windbag.
Well, I went like a year ago too, and
it changes your life, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Oh, it's like the Bible becomes Technicolor. Okay, I'll try to make this short, but concise is not my spiritual gift. In the year 2000, that was the second time I went to Israel. And you know how you if you get the chance to go to the Western Wall, you put a prayer in the Western Wall. And the prayer I put in the Western Wall, year 2000, was basically, I don't remember verbatim, but this is close to it, was basically, Lord, if it pleases you, I would love to have a family. Yeah. And I'd love to become a mom. And I was just thick as a brick in my 20s and 30s.
You're going to take Missy.
Okay. No. Last year, 2019, I get to take Missy to Israel. I get to baptize her in the Jordan, and not the touristy part, but the southern part where John baptized Jesus. That's where they went nasty, dirty, ugly agricultural runoff, but that's the legit baptism site. Mm-hmm. I get to baptize her there. She wasn't really excited because it was so gross and rainy and muddy, but I was like, I'll pay for therapy later. Baby, you're getting baptized in the Jordan right here. And then having walking up with this miracle daughter of mine to the Western Wall. And Rebecca, I didn't even know what to pray. And all I could think of was I wrote on a little scrap of paper, "Thank you, Jesus." And Missy and I together put that in one of those, those sacred cracks in that wall. And I thought, only God and I know that prayer that I prayed 19 years ago. God knew 19 years before that my beautiful daughter would be born to a precious mom who was dying of AIDS, and there would be nobody else to take care of like he had already written the story. And so, oh my goodness, I love Israel. I love the way the Bible becomes technicolor. You go, I believe this before, but now I'm stinking standing here. The historicity of it. Oh, I love. Did it just it totally rewrites the way you see scripture, doesn't it?
Wrecked me. Okay, so we got married in May of 2018, and we went that November with some people from our church.
Oh, wow.
And so, gosh, there's just so much. Like, to be.
Hey, what was your favorite? Like, if you had to distill it to like 2 or 3 moments, what were your favorites?
I loved taking a worship boat on the Sea of Galilee.
Yeah.
So there was a moment, and my husband he's a pastor. He's an extroverted pastor, right? So you can only imagine. Yeah. And he, had done so much studying of just, everything to like help lead us through this trip. And there was this one point on the boat. We just wept the whole time. I don't know what anybody else did, but we just
wept. Can't help it. You're just undone. I don't care if you're not even demonstrative in your personality. You go there. Everybody will be wrecked if you know Jesus beautifully.
Yes. Wrecked. And so we're on the boat. The song Oceans is playing.
Oh, Lord have mercy.
Of course. But my husband looked at me and he was like, "Okay, do you see that kind of cliff face off in the distance?" I said, "Yeah." Mm-hmm. He said, "Do you realize, like, for people who would journey from the shore of Galilee to Jerusalem, that would have been kind of the well-worn, easy path, to Jerusalem. And just the thought, not only of like what happened on these waters in the life of Jesus, but then to think there was a time my Savior walked through that valley that I'm looking at for the last time.
That's right.
To head to the cross. And there's just, everything is just hitting you at once. And it's like rewriting every children's Bible that you've ever looked at in your life, where you've tried to imagine what these places are like. And I'm reading through the Old Testament right now, and it's so cool. At every turn, you're not just imagining, like you've stood in those very places. And I will never read my Bible the same ever again. I can't wait to go back.
Yeah.
Anyway, just in talking to you, I was like, man, if this girl has not been to Israel, it would wreck her. And if she's been, I bet.
The first time I went, I was a lot older than you. And I didn't have this burning desire to go to Israel. I don't know why, but I was on staff with a ministry called Focus on the Family at the time, and got invited to go on this with a small group with Kay Arthur. Kay has been to Israel hundreds of times. She's on the Israeli Board of Tourism. She's just this, huge fan of connecting with the God of the Bible through the land of Jesus. And anyway, I guess I was maybe early 30s. I want to say this was like 97 or 98. And so I went kind of like dutifully. Yeah. And by the first day, I was like you. I could not stop crying because there's just something in your spirit that goes, "Oh, it's real, it's real, it's real." And not that I had doubted the existence of God, but sometimes we misunderstand his word. We kind of malign it to be a rule book or this collection of morality tales. And we don't see it as a supernatural love story. But when you go there and you make the connection, all of a sudden it's just that it's like your soul has an aha moment, of going, he really is that good. And he's that real. This is not some existential framework we've created because we need to be rescued by something divine. Jesus actually was incarnate and walked this land. It's extraordinary.
Yeah, it is. I think the first moment that hit me really hard was the drive from the airport to Jerusalem.
Yeah.
Our tour guide read a Psalm of Ascent to us, the one that like they always read you on the way up to Jerusalem.
Right.
And I just remember just weeping. Like everybody else is just sitting there like, oh, this is so pretty. It's cute sunset. and my husband is like, are you okay? And you're just having that like reality moment of like, we're taking a tour bus up to Jerusalem. So when you read all these Psalms that make no sense and they're talking about these directional things that you don't understand, you don't put into context until you're there.
Right.
Anyway, I could talk about this all day.
Oh no, me too. It is. So listen, I told somebody, and this is terrible theology, but I told somebody recently that because they said, what are you asking God for in this next year? And I couldn't right away think of something. And I said, and I meant it sincerely, but again, this is terrible theology, because God is for us and never stops giving good gifts to his beloved. But I said, he's done so much for me. I said, getting to baptize my daughter who gave her heart to Jesus in the Jordan. I said, if he never gives me another thing, that was enough for me. Yeah. And, this person rightfully kind of slapped me upside the head for being, a little too spiritual. She was like, Lisa, first of all, don't limit God. I was like, I know. But I just can't imagine anything better. And then it was so cool, Rebecca. We were with a pretty big audience. I was there a pretty big tour group. I was there with Lisa Turkhurst, and Lisa had to fly out early, and we were tag teaching. And so I got to share when we were at the garden, and it was our last time we had the group together. And wouldn't you know it, one of the people who came on our group came with his wife, didn't know Jesus. And we had a salvation during our service and communion there at the Garden Tomb. And you just go, even now, Jesus is so kind and so compassionate that even now he's rescuing the one who's wooing people to himself. And it was the coolest time I think I've ever gotten to pray with somebody who's meeting Jesus for the first time, because you go, goodness gracious, won't he do it? So yeah, every day has the potential for a miracle because our God is so good. I just think it's kind of like your eyes are open a little wider when you're over there. So the miracles are amplified. He's doing that everywhere. It's just you kind of see it louder in Israel.
Yeah, I agree. Man, I love that so much. It's such a special place. I can't wait to go back. And it's so funny to think.
But so is Southern Mississippi, Rebecca. I mean, so is Southern Mississippi.
You're right. Yeah.
Hey, my sister went to Belhaven for undergrad, and my great aunt started the first Christian bookstore in Hattiesburg, Mississippi.
Hattiesburg, that's not
Hattiesburg, Mississippi. So that's awesome. We've got some roots in Mississippi. I love your state.
I love it. I love that you're saying it the right way too. You're skipping that second double
adopted state.
Yeah,
that's right.
I love it.
That's right.
Okay, so we have a few more things to talk about that I'm so excited to get to know you more over on our Patreon page. And so for listeners who have not already subscribed over there, we're going to do a little quick bonus.
Cool. Jump over today, y'all. Jump over today.
With Lisa over there. So we're going to do that. But for this conversation, Lisa, I'm so thankful for you. Thank you for being with me.
Oh, thank you for having me. I hope I get to actually be face to face with you.
Me too.
When COVID's over. I love your heart. And you have the most amazing voice. Like you should always be doing radio. I love your voice. Your voice is so rich and melodic.
Oh, you're sweet. Well, this has been a blast. I've loved having you.
Thank you for having me.